Hey, what's going on, everybody? Boilon here, back for another video on Marvel Strike Force. And in today's video, you may have seen the title and thumbnail for this video. And I will just say up front that I would say about maybe half of this video is going to be a rant of some kind. And it is going to be directly related to Battleworld. And why? It's just because I feel that we're coming into, well, today we're coming into Zone 4 later on today. And I have this sinking feeling and this bad feeling in my stomach that this is not going the way that they expected it to be. And honestly, I'm not surprised because so many people, whether it was Envoys or MSFPV or everyone else who got a chance to playtest the game, including myself, who I didn't playtest it, but I saw Battle World before I left the Envoy program, and everyone was saying that this was going to be hot dog shit, right? And they still released it anyways, and it made me really wonder what is going on over there and how this is going to be impacting long term. I've been already receiving DMs after DMs about people unhappy. Even one weekend, we're going to talk about. I mean, it is early, but I still want to talk about that later on as well, and what that means, and that a lot of people aren't going to be hanging on and might just hang up their game because this is not what they expected, and I don't know how much better it can get, really. So we're going to be talking about all that and more. So if you're ready to go, let's boil this down. Now, since we're doing a bit of a daily news recap a little bit, it would be amiss if I did not talk about the Ancient One Astral Orb, which went live yesterday, of course. But let's talk about the drop rates. Now, this is going to be mirroring the Oath Orb. It's the same, right? You're getting the Orb Fragments. I'm glad that there's no milestone. These things are going away slowly, and they're getting rid of those bloated milestones that have been in for each character. And so now you just get direct Orb Fragments, which means you need to open 20 of these in order to get one core orb. Now, on the right-hand side, you do have a small chance to get some T4s. It is what it is there, replacing things like raid energy that we used to get for that. Now, in the middle, they have changed up the drop rates a little bit here. There is no 10 shard drop, and collectively, it is a 20% Ancient One chance. Now, there was I don't know what happened to it, but there was a Reddit thread yesterday talking about this with ChatGPT odds, which was wrong. And so I just want to let people know, for people who saw that, it was not accurate. And I'm going to show you what the math for the estimated value of these orbs actually are. And yes, Ancient One is worse than I believe that the thread was comparing Ancient One to Blade, which actually does have the same drop rates as Oath. But anyways, I felt it more appropriate to compare Oath and Ancient One because they both had the orb fragment, the 100 orb fragment on the side, right? And so it is worse for Ancient One, but not at that significantly. This is 0.848 shards and 0.835 shards on the two orbs, respectively. So yes, they changed the drop rates a little bit because the Oath orb does have a 10 shard drop chance, whereas these have a collective higher chance of a 2 and a 3. So that's what's major difference is to this. And also one shard was 32.8, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, or 30% or something like that. In the Oath Orb. But because of the 2 and the 3 being a bit higher, the estimated value is largely unchanged. It is worse, but not to the extent that people thought it was. So before you go around using ChatGPT to doing all your math, sometimes it's better just to do it yourself. Now, let's get to the bulk of what I want to talk about in this video, which is related to Battleworld. Now, this Cosmic Battle Alliance milestone is what I think is giving a lot of people stress. This is directly associated with the Spec Ops related missions, and now I don't know if I'm necessarily going to hit the limit on this, which is, related to those circles, right? The Spec Op missions and completing them, and you get 5,000 points for each. You realistically are supposed to clear about 6 of these per zone or per day, and in order to get the cap of 150k. How much does this matter? You might be wondering. And in my opinion, it actually matters very little, at least for this month. And let me tell you why. The Cosmic Elixirs, the month-long currency that you do get in this, it's completely meaningless because you can go into the turkey store, buy 10,000 turkeys, and that gives you points to the month-long. There's something like 28,000 or 30,000 of Cosmic Elixirs in this entire milestone. It doesn't matter. You could literally just core once or twice more into the turkey store, buy 10,000 turkeys, and that'll give you more points than these cosmic elixirs do. Now, the rest of what's in here, however, there are gold orbs and some armory orbs, which arguably I think is garbage at this point in time. Most even mid-game players don't give a shit about these armory orbs. You get way more of teal gear in the raid store anyways, and so that part doesn't matter. There are some character orb fragments, the phase 1 orbs, but I would also argue that these are dog shit as well. Just like the ancient one is right now, which is going to be replacing the second week of Cosmic Battle. That was in the data mines as well. I would say that it's more hassle and more stress to be paying attention to these milestones, which are going to be capping out at milestone 16. If you did everything perfectly, I think you can get milestone 16, and that's about it. We talked about how it's a decline from getting these milestones from the raid version of the Alliance milestone. And so, for all the hassle and stress the Spec Ops is giving Alliances, it's not even worth it that much. If you really break it down in terms of what you're getting, it's actually worthless. And now that brings us to actually Battleworld itself. Now, I'm still in Zone 3 when I'm actually recording this video. But I want to just let's talk about Spec Ops really briefly because I'm here. I think people are attributing way too much to this, and I think that's the problem, is that there's a serious disconnect between the value of Spec Ops and how much stress it actually puts on the Alliance, making people think that they need to do this when in fact they actually don't. Now, I actually thought that these points were additive, like I would get 720 for the first circle and then plus 960 for the second one, but I think it's actually only a cap of 5280 for all 8 of them. It's not like 720 plus 960 plus 2160. It's just 5280. It's from what other people have told me. Let me know if I'm wrong in the comments down below. But even if it wasn't, like, the amount of VPs that you get from Spec Ops is just garbage. And here, let me just show you, because right now I think we've been getting about, my alliance has been getting about 250k per day, I think, thereabouts. And so take that 5280, right, and just divide it by what I have right now, 241,530 times by 100, 2.18%. That's how much value is attributed to Spec Ops for how much stress that it actually gives and puts on the Alliance. So for this to be worth it, it would have to be worth 10 times as much, right? Like something like that. For the amount of effort that this takes, because keep in mind, this is a mobile game that people are now, or that Scopely is now asking the players to not only use Discord to like the 10th degree here, but also spreadsheets and other things for assignments and other things like that, so people don't fuck it up. And if one person fucks it up, then the whole thing collapses, right? Or you basically, because it requires 100% participation. So if one person screws up their assignments or whatever, then maybe you can't complete your Spec Ops circles, right? And therefore you don't get the 8th circle, or that's just assuming you have everything, right? Some of these have been worse. Some days have been worse than others. But just hypothetically, somebody screws it up, you're dead. And so it's just for the amount of stress this is putting on alliances and potentially breaking them, just because it does create this environment where, if people are getting it wrong, if people are not doing the right thing, people are getting frustrated, and alliances could be breaking up over this. I have been hearing that, it's definitely putting on a lot of stress and a lot of leadership, especially, right? I'm a leader of my alliance, and I've basically just said, I'm not going for 100% completion. I'm going for like 6 circles. I essentially said, hey, do Spec Ops 1 through 6, and then we'll leave the rest, right? And if we get it, great. And if we don't, whatever, doesn't matter. That's the kind of take that I'm doing. But even then, at the end of the day, it is so meaningless. When you looked at the math that I just did, that it's just 2% of the overall VPs at D0. I'm not even sure if this scales. I mean, maybe it does scale on higher difficulties. I effing hope so. But that 2% number, I don't expect to change, right? Comparatively to the rest of the VPs for that day. So they really, not only do they need to change the value that this is worth, it needs to be worth more for people to give a shit about it. They need it to be more than 10 out of 10 per player. To require 100% participation is absolute insanity, in my opinion. Bumping this up to 12, or if they really want to be nice, 15 would be really great and a great quality of life change. That on top of the change of points, because it just frankly is not worth it, and you might as well ignore the whole thing. And because once you heard what I said earlier about the Alliance milestone, honestly, you could ignore most of this as well. It doesn't make much of a difference. Like, I'm telling you, like, a couple of those milestones, is not going to make or break your gameplay, especially because we're no longer getting to the end of those 500,000 ions. It's just Spec Ops is absolutely insane, not worth the stress that people are making it out to be. But I'm not surprised that they are, because they designed this and they explain this so poorly that people are putting a lot of pressure on each other to do Spec Ops when in fact it means almost nothing. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about is just how lazy of a design that these combat missions have been. Now, this one in particular is the Astral, or the Elite mission, the Astral and Pegasus nodes. For those of you who are not aware, zones 1, 3, and 5 have the exact same waves. Exact. Right down. It's literally copy and paste. You might have noticed this because on zone 1, they had the exact same enemies, especially with that Mr. Negative there. People might have noticed that one. The exact same wave. Super goddamn lazy. Now, some of you might have remembered the elite mission for Zone 2 from yesterday. Well, I guess now at this point it might have been 2 days ago, or it will be today, right? Zones 2 and 4 is also the same. And that's going to be the Old Man Logan that appeared out of it. That's probably what you guys noticed, was the Old Man Logan that appeared in that mission. And I think the fact that they did not do unique missions for each 5 of the zones is just super goddamn lazy. Now, they've been working on this for over a year. They've been cooking. Now, I don't know if they've been actually working on this for over a year, but they've been cooking it for over a year. And they come out with this lazy garbage with old characters that's just absolutely crazy. And speaking of old characters, a lot of the missions on these waves, a lot of the enemies on these waves, sorry, are like old. I'm surprised there's even Masters of Evil, but maybe this one's not so bad. You may have noticed the ones on earlier zones where they had like super old characters, tons of rhinos. This one actually isn't as bad as like Zone 2 and Zone 1 was. I want to go back to that one actually, because some of these combat missions were just super, super lazy. Can I actually see it? Yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, what the hell? Like, they haven't been relevant in like God knows. And it's just because it's so easy. I don't even see this being much more difficult at higher difficulties. But that's just me. Maybe things will change. I doubt it. But Bionic Avengers and like there's some Pegasus, but it's mostly Bionic Avengers in here. This absolute dog shit. And then also in zone number 1, you may have remembered there was like a lot of Dark Hunters and like Iron Fists and shit. Like, well, what is this? Like a bunch of Iron Fists and like old Defenders. It's absolutely ridiculous. They've not been relevant in some time. I don't expect it. I don't want like Mercs for Money enemies necessarily spammed everywhere, but there's a huge disconnect between the age of these characters. Wave 1 Avengers, like, come on. Like, they've had time to think about this, and they put like dog shit characters that are so easy to auto, it's not even funny. And maybe that's why, right? Like, they're trying to make it easy for even new players, that the characters are not that difficult to get through. But they've had so much time to work on this, and nothing feels unique. Now, one thing that I will say, however, is the Herald missions. I'm almost glad that it's quick, because it's literally just one wave. But even the enemies don't even seem like they're synergized together. We have a Gamora, and we have a Moondragon, and then we have, I guess, Photon and Ghost Rider Robbie, and then we have just a Gore out of nowhere because he's a symbiote, right? Or he's tagged as a symbiote. And it just seems to not really have any coherency. And I just don't understand that. Now, at least it's easy and doesn't take very long. We'll see, right? On D5, maybe I'm gonna get blown out of the water, and I doubt it, but it just does not seem like it's worth the time. Like, I'm not having fun, actually. And that's really, I guess, the crux of a lot of this, is that I don't know how much fun I'm actually having doing this. Now, granted, I have 2 accounts that I'm running, and that's on me. But I'm spending about 15 minutes, I guess, like per account on this per day, and we're going to be running this every single day. Now, I still think that D4 and D5 is going to be an auto fest for most players, or it's not most players, but players who are towards the end game. So there's no strategy. I don't think there's going to be strategy. I don't think I'm going to have to actually pay attention to which characters I'm targeting. I think that by and large, if I'm using the right characters, it's going to be that easy that I should be able to just walk over it. Now, if there's certain ones like with Zone 2 with the mercenaries, right? Like if I'm really like crutching myself, maybe at D5 that's going to be a bit of an issue. But I don't like how this entire game mode is predicated on the final boss in Zone 6 and Null. Like, yeah, maybe this is going to be fun. Maybe not at D0, but maybe at like D4 and 5, this will be fun, right? It'll be engaging. But everything else to me does not seem engaging, and is 5 days of crap worth 1 day of fun, or not even fun as such, but just different, right? This is a bit unique, and I wanted to compare this a little bit to I don't know if you guys have ever played There's probably a lot of you actually who have probably played Star Wars Galaxy Heroes, or maybe you played Lord of the Rings Heroes of Middle Earth. Now that was a game that I covered for a little while anyways. I think it was like 6 months before the game ended up dying. Now, yeah, it did die. But, they did have raids, which are a lot like things in Star Wars Galaxy Heroes, but they had unique mechanics in their battles where there were big boss battles as well, like something like a Null, but there were also regular wave missions where we would fight orcs where things were actually different. And excuse the little bit of Boilonception here. So I just wanted to bring this up. This was a video of mine because I used to cover Loader Home, and this is Zone 2, I guess you could say, the Moria Cave Troll that you had to fight in that. And you could see it was a big boss battle, and you had your team of 5 characters, a lot like Marvel Strike Force, but this was not something that you could realistically auto. Like I'm going to give Capital Games credit for where it's due, that they created unique gameplay where I had to think that there was some strategy as to why I'd want to do something, etc., etc. And it wasn't something I could just put on auto and face roll. This was actually challenging content, and I did actually have a lot of fun doing it. And every single day was different. It was Some of them did have like orc waves, but they were different in terms of how they played, how the gameplay mechanics were. And that's not something we're seeing at all, really, in Marvel Strike Force, other than things like combat mods, which arguably does not really move the needle or change the gameplay all that much, really. And so I just wanted to share this with you. Yes, I know a lot of people had issues with the graphics when the game came out, but that aside, I actually do think that the gameplay was actually quite fun. Almost kind of wish I kind of wish it didn't die, but there we go. This is I want to show you the orc stuff though. And once again, excuse the sort of Boilonception here. Now, what you're seeing in the background here is basically, I think it's like day one. It's day one of the raids. Now, these ran like kind of like how Battleworld does with the different days and the zones. This one was day one, where we were faced with a bunch of waves of Moria orcs. Now, there's a particular Moria orc here in the middle here called the Moria Bomber, and it was your goal to basically try to get him. And as you can see, like there was ways and mechanics why I couldn't, because there was taunts and tanks and things like that made it really challenging. But you would eventually attack the bomber so many times that he would drop the bomb and kill the entire team on their side, and you would get additional points. You could see at the very top of my screen here, maybe, that I was racking up points towards a 900,000 goal based on the difficulty. And that's another thing too, that the difficulty chosen was individual. So it's not like an alliance based where you're all doing D3 or D4. You could actually, each person could choose their own difficulty for that mission. And that's what made it unique and different, because people could participate no matter, whether they were lower TCP or higher TCP, that you could choose, what difficulty you ran. And that was how much points that you contributed to your alliance or your guild in this case. And so that's what I mean, is that these characters never existed in the game form prior to this. And it was characters and game mechanics that were made specifically for this that made it fun. I can't say the same about Battleworld, and I think that's the most unfortunate thing, that aside from the Null boss battle where he does have his own unique mechanics, the rest of it is just dog shit. The zones, the combat missions are dull. There's nothing unique about it. It's just kind of doing an enhanced raid battle, if you even want to consider it that way, right? It's multiple waves. Maybe the enemies do something slightly different, but I mean, it's the same kits, right? There's nothing unique in that sense, and that's what bothers me. And at the end of the day, I think what bothers me the most is that the rewards don't even seem that impactful. Now, yes, I do understand we're at D0, but I think we spoke about the rewards before, and I feel like it just doesn't match the amount of effort that we're putting in to play this. And this is something that I think is going to be dead in the water in a few weeks' time, or if not before that, if not now. Like honestly, I'm talking to a lot of people on a daily basis about how boring this is, how this is not engaging gameplay, how, again, maybe we're gonna get one day of fun here at the end with Null, but then is the rest of the week worth it? The 5 days that we have to do to get there, the Spec Ops, the stress from the Alliance, especially when it comes to Alliance leadership, a lot of that is problematic. And so at the end of the day, this just tells me that they need to invest in some serious quality of life changes to Battleworld, something that's going to make this a little bit more engaging, something this is going to make this less stressful for leadership in alliances when it comes to Spec Ops, but also they need to make Spec Ops more valuable. They need to make it more, I was about to say fun, but that's not what I meant to say, is that they need to make it more relevant. You know, like the 2% total of VPs is not enough. It needs to be like 20%. And I know some people might be frustrated to hear me say that because that means it's going to put more value on that. But as it says right now, there's actually no reason to even be worried about Spec Ops. People are stressing the shit out of it. But like honestly, it is not worth it one bit. So I would honestly just not care if you're in an alliance that doesn't do it that well. It's actually not that big of a deal. If your alliance can do it, great. But for everyone else, I wouldn't put a lot of stock into it because unless they make changes, it's not worth your time. And that's where I'm going to get to is that Battleworld, I'm just disappointed. It's had this much time. It's had so much time to develop something, to cook something good for the community, and this is what we get, and this is all we are getting. It may very well improve over the next 6 to 8 months, but people are, but between the other issues, which I didn't really stress that much here in this video about things like character releases and things like that, all of these things have been negatives in my opinion that are slowly pushing people to decide whether or not they want to continue playing this game. And that's what makes me concerned. Why am I making this video? Because I'm concerned about how this is going to impact the player base, and I don't want it to die. I don't want Marvel Strike Force to die. Obviously, I have some invested interest in this, right? And so I would rather push off the time that I would have to look for something else rather than, if they don't make any major changes, then this might happen sooner rather than later. That's just my thoughts anyways. Let me know what yours are in the comments down below. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. And until next time, stay safe and healthy. And I'll see you all later. Boilon signing out.